Okay, so you probably heard I got interrupted there, but we'll just keep on going. So you'll see same sort of deal. The SendGrid has permissions of its own. The only permission is to administer the module settings. We're going to leave that as administrator, and it also has a configuration of its own. Now this is where you want to start. Every installation of this module is going to need an API key, and that's what connects the website with the API. The SendGrid account of the user that the website is owned by. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our SendGrid account, go down to, I think it's settings, and find our API key. It makes you create a new one. Like once you've created one, it won't show it to you. So I'm going to create one. I'm going to say this is for the 720 Drupal demo. That's the key name. I'm going to give it full access, create and view. There's the key. I've copied it. I'm going to go back to Drupal and paste it here. And you'll note for now, because it's not connected to an account, there's nothing in this here. But once you save it, now the website is linked to your SendGrid account. The second config that you're going to want to do is say what SendGrid list you want to sync the users to. So you can say no list if you want. It has picked up the fact that in my SendGrid account there's two lists, so I only have two. One called Next, one called Drupal website. And if I want the users from Drupal to be synced to like a particular list, I'll use just that list. And I'll hit save. The other thing that you're allowed to configure here is that SendGrid takes an email address, but it also takes a first name and it takes a last name optionally. If you want to sync a first name and a last name over to SendGrid from Drupal, you need to tell this. First of all, you need to have the fields in the user. Drupal has to have a field for first name and last name before you can sync that field over. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So for now, we'll leave that blank. And now we're good to go. So what happens is, if you look at my SendGrid account now, and you go to my contacts, I don't have anybody. But let's say I go to my people in this thing. There's a bunch of people in my website. So the integration occurs at the point when a user account is saved, either saved or updated. So it's not going to take all the people and automatically send them like the first run or something like that. It's just going to integrate at the point of saving. So I'm just going to take this person here. This is my email address, so I don't mind adding it to this thing. And you'll notice in Drupal, my account has a field called SendGrid ID. Now, it's blank now, and what that means is that this user has not been synced. But if I hit save, at that moment, it's going to sync it over to SendGrid. And if I go back to that user, I'll have a SendGrid ID. That means that the user's been synced. So I'm going to go over to SendGrid and I'm going to hit reload here. Now, it sometimes takes a second or two for these numbers to be updated. So don't worry if this takes like 30 seconds or a minute to update. The user is in there, as you can tell here. So here's the user that's been synced. And there I am. So let me do another one. I don't know. I guess I'll just do this guy. Nothing will happen with his. He won't get sent an email or anything, but I just want to show you that he's added to the person, Adam Randall. So now if I go back to all my contacts, Adam Randall will be in there in a minute. And you'll see here he is, Adam Randall. And these both have been set to Drupal website list because that's what I set in my configs. So the next thing is, if you want to also sync a first name and a last name over to SendGrid, there has to be a first name, last name field in the user record in Drupal. Otherwise, what's it going to send? So let's go to configuration and let's turn on, let's go to, I'm looking for people, yeah, account settings. Let's add a field for first name so that users in Drupal get a first name, and I'll just call it, first name. This, and this might be different. Different Drupal sites will have different setups. Like sometimes you'll have you'll have first name and last name on user records. Sometimes you'll have a whole bunch of stuff on user records. Sometimes you'll have nothing in user records, whatever. but this is designed to be flexible. So like whatever you have going on your Drupal site will work with this integration. So I've added a first name and a last name, and I don't know, maybe we could even add an address or something like that. I'm not going to do this all up, but I just want to add one extra field just to notice. So this Drupal site is now set up to have a first name and a last name, and an address field on every user. So let's go back to the user, and I'll show you. Let's choose this guy just to show you how it updates. So that's this guy. And now if I'm going to go in here and add a first name and a last name, that's me, and I hit save, it's, whoops, what? It's not going to sync the first name and the last name. And why is that? Well, that's because in my configuration for this module, I have not selected what Drupal field should be sent to SendGrid as the first name and what Drupal field should be sent to SendGrid as the last name. This dropdown is now populated by any of the added fields that are added to a user. Obviously, every user has a username, which you can use as the first name if you want. I'm going to use first name as my first name, and I'm going to use last name as my last name, and I'm going to save that configuration. And now that that's been saved, that means that if I go in here and I update my first name, I'll just correct the spelling, and I hit save, if I go to this, now it knows my first name and my last name. And let's say I go into Drupal and I change my first name, like, I don't know, Benjamin, and I'll hit save. Now on update, this has been updated. So if I go to SendGrid now, I see Benjamin is here. Then what else did I want to show you? I guess that's it. So yeah, and you'll see now both these guys. Now, this is only a one-way sync, so any changes made in SendGrid will not go backwards to the website. Also, the website cannot delete anything. That's probably a good idea by design, so that if you don't end up deleting users in Drupal and it affects your CRM or something like that. So it's a one-way sync from Drupal to SendGrid. The other thing to know is that although we save the SendGrid ID here, and it's used in the API, this is really related to the email address. So if you change there's no universal SendGrid ID for a user for a record. It's really just a hash of the email address. So if you change the email address, you're also going to change the SendGrid ID automatically. I don't know why you would care about that, but just so you know. That is it. So let us know if you have any questions. Okay.